Scientists have now proven something that most of us already knew. After the 2016 election, many of us spent less time at Thanksgiving dinner when visiting relatives who voted differently than us in the election. There's no question that these are polarizing times, and relatives who vote for the other party can seem harder to understand and relate to than ever before. But is Donald Trump himself a polarizing figure? What would that mean, and what would it tell us about those cousins who always turn up for turkey? In this video, we'll try to answer these questions by taking 3 simple thoughts and putting them together. At their intersection, we'll find one of the great questions of philosophy, and maybe some grounds for optimism that we're really not as different from one another as it can seem. The first thought is simple. There's no question that our relationships are shaped by how well we understand one another. When you understand me in the same way that I understand myself, we avoid unnecessary sources of conflict by at least being able to get onto the same page about what we disagree about. But even our two-way relationships never exist in a vacuum. We constantly triangulate on one another, and this is the second thought, by means of shared points of contact. Our shared interest in Tolkien, love or hate of the Dodgers, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, downhill skiing, or even boy bands. One of the best ways to find someone who thinks like we do is to find someone who both understands and appreciates the same things that we do about points of common contact. When we understand the same things and react to them in the same way, that can bring us together. The flip side of this point is that when we share the same understanding of something, but react in different ways, that can put us into conflict. A famous stock photograph that has become fodder for memes depicts a boyfriend with wandering eyes. The photo works so well as a meme precisely because the scenario that it depicts is such a familiar one, and it captures it so perfectly. When a woman passing on the sidewalk comes into this couple's relationship, it creates conflict between them because the boyfriend's reaction to the passing posterior is so different both from his girlfriend's own reaction and from the reaction that she wants him to have. So we've seen that when both of us share the same understanding of a third party, that can either bring us together or it can push us apart, depending on whether we see each other reacting in ways that attract us or in ways that repel us. So in a very trivial sense, polarizing figures can be figures who we all understand, but who we react to very differently. But if this is the only way in which Trump is polarizing, then he's simply helping us to see more clearly our existing differences, even among family. But instead of stopping here, let's dig deeper. The third simple thought that can help us out is that just as we do not always perfectly understand one another, we also do not perfectly understand the other parties that we use to triangulate on. And if we don't understand them perfectly, then sometimes we may not understand them in the same way. For example, but when Donald drops in on your relationship with those cousins who show up for turkey every November, you'll be tempted to use their very different reactions to him to triangulate and tell you something about them. But if they understand Trump and his behavior in a very different way than you do, then perhaps they do not need to be as different from you as they seem in order to react to him in the way that they do. Do we really understand Trump differently from one another? It seems that we do. Take the case of the president's tweets. Trump's tweeting behavior has been hailed by liberals as evidence of Trump's truest, deepest thoughts, a privileged source of insight into his soul. At the same time, it's commonly disregarded by conservatives as a kind of unfortunate, compulsive tic that must be tolerated. But which of these interpretations is right? We must constantly make choices like this in interpreting one another. When Sheila snapped angrily at me, was that her, or was she simply hangry? When I complimented you, does that deserve gratitude? Or was I just in an unusually good mood? These matters of interpretation are what philosophers call the question of whether some behavior is attributable to you. Behavior that's attributable to you counts in some sense as more fully you. It's worth engaging with and reacting to, rather than overlooking. But sometimes we attribute your behavior to hunger, lack of sleep, or even to a persistent tic or compulsion that's best thought of as an affliction that you face as part of your predicament, rather than as representing you or your choices. Now, understanding which of your behavior really represents you as a protagonist, and which is only a consequence of your predicament, leads us quickly into one of the deepest and most central questions in philosophy, the question of what makes persons like us different from ordinary things. Yet this philosophical question has immediate consequences for life. If Sheila's angry snap was really her inaction, then the fact that you approve of her tells me something about you. But if it was instead merely her anger in action, then the fact that you approve of her tells me little about you. So if you and I disagree about whether Sheila's angry snap was really her or just anger, then we will come to very different understandings of the significance of your approving of Sheila. And the same points go if we put in Trump in Sheila's place. In that way, a figure who looms salient in all of our lives could push us apart not by helping us to more clearly understand what we don't like about one another, but instead by deepening our misunderstandings, by creating an illusion of greater difference than actually exists, as we see them through a polarizing lens. That doesn't make them right or make us wrong, and it doesn't reduce the moral stakes in play, but it might, just might, help us to keep hope in sight that we might yet find some common ground. If you like this video and would like to go deeper and learn more, check out the Conceptual Foundations of Conflict project at philosophy.academy/conflict.